Welcome to this tutorial on the Aastra SIP-DECT basic installation. In this tutorial, we'll cover the following topics. I'll give you an overview of the hardware components and the software applications we'll use during the basic installation. We'll launch the first software application, the Open Mobility Configurator, and we'll program the RFPs. Then we'll launch the second software application, the Open Mobility Manager, or OMM, and enter the initial system information. We'll install and configure the first L-RFP. Then we'll add DECT handset users. We'll power up and subscribe the handsets to the RFP. We'll install the second L-RFP, set up additional clusters, and I'll show you how to set up a second standby OMM. Then we'll install the third L-RFP. At this point, we'll have to go to the license server website where we'll go through the L-RFP license process. We'll import this file, which will activate the built-in license features. If you have not already taken the Aastra SIP-DECT Technical Training and System Design course, please do so before continuing with this tutorial. It is available on our Training on Demand webpage and on our training resource portal. The Aastra SIP-DECT Enterprise solution is made up of 1 to 20 pre-licensed L-RFPs and SIP-DECT phone handsets, while the Aastra SIP-DECT Enterprise Plus solution is made up of 1 to 2048 non-licensed or standard RFPs and SIP-DECT phone handsets. In this tutorial, I will be demonstrating how to install 3 RFP L35 IPs. These are pre-licensed, and 4 SIP-DECT handsets. The Enterprise and Enterprise Plus solutions have the same basic installation practices, but the licensing is different. The Enterprise Plus can also support more RFPs in the system and can offer additional features, but the basic RFP installation is the same. The RFP L35 comes with mounting screws, a paper mounting template. If your facility does not support Power over Ethernet, an optional RFP power cord can be purchased. With the handset, you get a charging cradle and a power cord. For the Enterprise solution, the L-RFPs, you will also need to purchase one separate OMM system CD. For the Enterprise Plus solution, additional bundled licenses will need to be purchased separately. The first step is to plug in your Power over Ethernet cable into the RFP. If your network does not support PoE, then you may plug in the optional power cable. Plug the charging cradle's power cable into the charging cradle base. The charging cradle is used to recharge the DECT handsets. That's the hardware we will be working with in this tutorial. We will also be using 2 software applications in this tutorial to configure and program the RFPs. They are the OM, or Open Mobility Configurator, and the OMM, Open Mobility Manager. The first application, the OM Configurator, throughout this tutorial, I will simply refer to it as the configurator. This is a Java application that is included on the OMM system CD. We will use this software application to program a static IP address and other network settings onto each RFP. The other application is the OMM. This is a software application that resides on the first L-RFP and administers all handset and mobility features, including the signaling interface to the SIP call server or IPPBX. It also has a web interface application that we will use to add and configure RFPs and to create SIP-DECT handset users. After the RFP boots up, the RFP will need an IP address. This can be a static IP address or can be assigned by a pre-configured DHCP server using DHCP option 224 or 43. Warning: the RFP will not get the necessary settings with a standard DHCP network. In this tutorial, I will only cover how to assign a static IP address. We will use the configurator to assign the static IP address to each RFP. Static IP addresses are assigned by the IT group or system administrator that manages the Ethernet network. If you are not sure of what static IP address to use, check with them. The configurator is a Java application that requires that Java 1.6 or higher is installed on your computer. First, connect a PC or laptop to the same Ethernet network as your RFP. Here's a good tip. The easiest way for the configurator to communicate with the RFP is to be on the same subnet as the RFP. To launch the configurator, insert the OMM system CD and browse to the CD content in the software folder. Look for and double-click on the file om_configurator.jar. This will launch the configurator. In the upper right corner drop-down box is the NIC or network interface card that your PC or laptop will use to attempt to communicate with the RFP. I bring this up because some PCs have multiple Ethernet cards. If this applies to you, make sure you have selected the NIC that is connected to the same subnet as your RFP. Next, click on the Scan button in the top left corner. This will search for RFPs. Notice the status in the bottom left corner. Scan, request, OK. This means it found something. If it displays timer expired, it didn't auto-detect any RFPs. Here are a couple of simple quick things you can check if you see the display message, timer expired. Your PC or laptop is not connected to the same network or subnet. To troubleshoot, take the CD out of your PC or laptop and put the OMM system CD in an existing PC in the area. Then relaunch the configurator application and rescan. Another thing to check is that the RFP is not powered up. This could be because the LAN connection does not support PoE. If none of the display lights are on, try connecting the optional RFP power cable. Here is something else to check. If the RFP is not connected to the same network or subnet as your PC, or is connected to a bad network jack. To check this, try connecting the RFP to a different LAN jack. This might resolve the problem. So let's continue with the configurator. In the RFP configuration list box is the MAC address of the device or devices it found. So let's verify that the MAC address matches the MAC address of our RFP. Turn the RFP over and check the label. As you can see, the RFP MAC address matches the MAC address found during the scan. Next, click on the MAC address in the configuration list. This will select the RFP, and we can begin the configuration of this specific RFP. Select the Login checkbox and enter the default username and password information. The default is OMM, all lowercase, for both fields. There is a button to return the RFP to factory defaults. We will continue down to Use Local Configuration. Select Yes if you were assigning a static IP address to the RFP. Select No if you were using a DHCP server to provide the IP address and settings for the RFP. I am using a static IP address, so I will select Yes. Next, enter the RFP's static IP address. For this RFP, it is 10.70.109.152. My network administrator assigned this IP address. Enter the subnet mask. Mine is 255.255.255.0. Enter the TFTP server address. The TFTP server is used to provide firmware updates. If you don't have a dedicated TFTP server, you can use a standalone TFTP program that runs on your PC, in which case you would enter the IP address of the PC. That is what I am doing. Enter the TFTP file name. You can refer to the 4.0 OMM system CD. At the time of this release, my file names were, for the RFP L35 and 36, IP RFP3G.dnld. And if you have an older RFP, L32 or L34s, it would be IP RFP2G.tftp. Enter the OMM IP address. The first RFP's IP address will be the OMM IP address. So I will enter 10.70.109.152. This will now be the OMM IP address. When you assign the OMM address, you are telling the system which L-RFP will be running the OMM software and controlling the functions of the SIP-DECT solution. When I launch the OMM web interface, this is the IP address I will use. When I add additional RFPs, this is the OMM IP address I will enter. I can also add a secondary OMM parameter to provide redundancy. I'll cover this later in the tutorial. The next field is router addresses. This is your gateway router IP address. Click on the plus sign and enter the gateway IP address. Your network administrator can give you this IP address. Before we upload these settings to the RFP, I want to add a few more parameters that are optional, but very nice to use. At the top, click on Add Parameter. Then from the drop-down list, select the additional parameter. I will select DNS addresses and click on the Add button. Notice a DNS addresses box has been added. Click on the plus sign. Enter the DNS IP address and click on the Add button. Your network administrator can also give you this IP address. Once you have added a DNS address, the OMM will be able to support additional parameters that use server names or domain names. I will demonstrate this in the next parameter, NTP server name. Click on Add Parameter. From the drop-down box, select NTP server name. Notice I could select NTP server name or NTP server address. Since I have added a DNS address, I can use server names. So I will select NTP server name. The NTP server parameter can be used to provide an external clock reference so that your handsets will have the correct time. In the field, I will enter pool.ntp.org. Go back to the top and click on Add Parameter, scroll down and select Country. This is used to enter a country-specific ringtone. For North America, enter 100. So that is all the choices and parameters for our initial configuration. Additional parameters can be added to meet your installation needs, such as VLAN or second OMM IP address. The last step is to send the configuration to the RFP. At the top, click on Send Config. Look at the status in the bottom left corner. If successful, it will say Sending OK. That completes the initial configuration setup. Once the RFP has a valid IP address and is communicating with the network, you will see the light turn green. The light will flash yellow intermittently. This is normal. Now let's log into the OMM. Launch a browser and enter the IP address of the OMM, which is running on the RFP we just configured. You may get a security warning. If you do, select Continue. Log into the OMM. Enter the username, OMM, all lowercase. The password is the same, OMM, all lowercase, and click on the OK button. Read and accept the end user license to continue. Before we can begin, we must change the OMM password and the root password. If passwords are not strong enough, on-screen messages will guide you to meet the minimum security requirements. The status page displays information about the OMM version, licenses, standby OMM, and additional features, the number of RFPs, handsets, and firmware information. In the license field, there is a message. Please import a valid license file to ensure the correct operation of the Open Mobility Manager, and that we have a grace period of 72 hours. This is referencing the demo part code. In just a moment, we will replace the demo part code with the part code that is printed on the OMM system CD. As a quick review, there are 3 licensing or activation components. I use the word activation because the L-RFPs are pre-licensed. When you enter either the part code or the license file into the OMM, you are unlocking and activating your system's built-in license capabilities. The components are a part code, a TAD code, and the L-RFP MAC addresses. For systems having 1 or 2 L-RFPs installed, you would only need to use the part code printed on the OMM system CD and enter the part code into the OMM to activate the built-in license features for up to 2 RFPs. In the past, we have had some people thinking they would save a step and went to the license server website and registered their 1 or 2 L-RFP MAC addresses. Don't do this. It will limit your system's maximum capacity to 2 L-RFPs, and then you're stuck. The license server needs 3 L-RFP MAC addresses to unlock the full capacity of the system, up to 20 L-RFPs. So for an installation that only has 1 or 2 L-RFPs, don't go to the website, just enter the part code into the OMM. For systems that will have 3 to 20 L-RFPs installed, you will be required to launch a browser and go to the license server website, where you will enter information that will generate a license file that will be used to activate the built-in license features on your L-RFPs. You will have to enter the part code and TAD code that is printed on your OMM system CD. In addition, you will have to enter 3 L-RFP MAC addresses that will be used in your installation. Plus, under License Product, you will select OM System Activation for L-RFP installations. Using this information, the website will generate a license file that we will save and then import into the OMM. This single file will activate the built-in license features and authorize your system to use up to 20 L-RFPs. In this tutorial, one by one, I will take you through the process of adding one RFP, a second RFP, and then a third RFP, so you will see what happens in all 3 scenarios. So let's continue and begin with a 1 RFP installation. From the menu on the left, click on System, then System Settings. About halfway down, you should see the Park field. The box to the right contains a demo part code. We need to replace the demo part code with the part code that is printed on the OMM system CD. You don't need to enter any spaces or dashes. The system will take care of that. Then from the next drop-down box, select your regulatory domain. I'll select US. The DEC authentication code field is a global setting that will pre-populate the auth code field when you add a new handset user. You can leave this blank or enter a code. I'm going to use 52s. Under Downloading New Firmware to Portable Parts, check the Active box. This tells the system to send the handsets new firmware when it's available. Scroll down to Time Zone, and from the drop-down box, select your time zone. Scroll back up and click OK. The OMM software running on your RFP needs to reboot. After it reboots, you will need to log back in. On the status screen to the right of licenses, you will see built-in licenses for up to 2 radio fixed parts, RFPs, meaning you can add a second RFP without having to do anything else. But when we add a third RFP, we will have to go get a license file and import it into the OMM to activate additional built-in license features. Go back to System and System Settings. Look at the part code we entered. Now look at the number to the right. The system has converted our part code that is printed on the OMM system CD and generated a fully numeric part code. This fully numeric part code is what we will enter into the SIP-DECT handsets. This is what we will use to pair or subscribe the handsets to the RFPs. I wanted to mention this now while we are thinking about part codes. We will come back to this in just a minute when we get to the handsets. So let's finish the basic configuration. Enter a system name. Then from the menu on the left, under System, click on SIP. We need to enter the telephony IP switch information, which is providing the extension numbers and telephone service for our SIP-DECT handsets. Enter the telephony IP switch IP address in the proxy server IP address field. Enter the same address in the register server IP address field. This information is provided to you by your service provider or your IT or telephony group. And if you look towards the bottom of the screen, you will see where you can select the preferred codecs that the handsets will use. When you're finished, click on the OK button. The OMM will attempt to begin communicating with the IP telephony switch. Next, click on the Radio Fix Parts. Then, make sure the Capturing Unconfigured Radio Fix Parts is started. To do this, click on the box labeled Start. A green check mark next to Capture Allowed indicates it is started. When you do this, a line of information about your RFP should be displayed. It will include the MAC address, IP address, and the type of RFP. Now, this is important. Before your RFP will work, it must have two green check marks, one under Connected and one under Active. Here is what you need to do. Click on the Edit icon on the left. It looks like a piece of paper with a pencil on top. Type the name of this RFP. I will type RFP1, my first RFP, TX for Texas, and N because this RFP is on the north part of my building. Click on the checkbox to the left of DECT Settings to activate the cluster. Then click on OK. Make sure Capture Allowed still has a green check mark. Watch the two fields under Connected and Active. Once you see two green check marks under Active and Connected, you will know your RFP is up and running. You have now completed the RFP basic configuration. Now we are ready to add a new SIP-DECT handset user to the system. To begin, power up the handset by pressing and holding the red power button on the handset for 1 or 2 seconds, then release the button. Below the LCD screen are 3 buttons you will use for navigation. Generally, the left button is used to save or configure a setting. The middle button is used to escape or cancel, and the right button is used to open a menu. To subscribe or pair the handset to the system, we are going to do 2 things. First, the handset has a unique number that identifies that specific handset. This unique number is called the IPEI number. And second, the OMM system has a unique number called PARC. So we are going to tell the OMM system what IPEI handset number to look for, and then we are going to tell the handset what PARC code to look for. This will identify the OMM and the RFP to subscribe to. Use the arrow keys to highlight your language and press the left Save Navigation or OK button. Enter the auth code. Since I am just getting the IPEI off the handset and not really logging in, using a blank or no auth code will work for now. However, this will change when I add the user in the OMM and program in the auth code. I will leave this field blank and press the left navigation button to continue. Highlight and show IPEI and press the left OK navigation button. Write this number down or keep it handy because we are going to type this number into the OMM in the next step. Before I move on, I want to share something that may come in handy. You may have received the handsets after someone else has powered up the handsets and answered the language or auth code questions, in which case the handsets will power up to a no subscription or similar screen. First, I will show you how to navigate to the Show IPEI menu, and second, I will show you how to reset the handsets to factory default. Okay, to go to the Show IPEI menu, press the right navigation button to open a menu. Arrow down until the word System is highlighted. Press the left navigation button to select OK. Arrow down, highlight Show IPEI, and press the left OK navigation button, and there is the IPEI number. Anytime you are in a menu, you can return directly to the main screen by quickly pressing the red hang-up/power button. Now I will show you how to reset the handset to factory default. Press the right menu navigation button. Once you are in a menu, anywhere in the menu, on the dial pad, press ****76#. Watch the top of the screen switch from Menu to Service Mode. Arrow down and highlight Reset Functions. Then press the left OK navigation button. Arrow down and highlight Master Reset and press the left OK navigation button. Press the left OK navigation button again to confirm yes. The handset will restart with the factory defaults and begin with the language screen. Let's return to the OMM and add our first handset user. where we will enter the IPEI number we just got from the handset. In the menu on the left, click on Portable Parts. To add a new DECT handset user, click on the New button. Type in the user's name. This is the name that will display on the handset. Enter the extension number. This will be given to you by your service provider or IT or telephony group. Enter the IPEI number from the handset. The DECT authentication code has been pre-populated from the system settings. Under SIP authentication, enter the username, and if used, a password. My IT group used the extension number as the username and didn't require a password. When you are finished, click on the OK button. The next thing is to make sure the subscription allowed is started. If it is not, click on the Start button. When subscription allowed is started, you will see a green check mark. One last thing, remember when I was talking about the part code under the menu System and System Settings? The all-numeric part code that the system generated is also listed on the Portable Parts page. We are going to need this number in the next step, so write it down or have it handy on your computer screen. On the handset, return to the main screen. If you are in a menu, press the middle Escape navigation button to go back one menu, or you can press the red Hang-Up/Power button to return directly to the main screen. Press the right navigation button to open the menu. Arrow down and highlight System, and press the left OK navigation button. Highlight New System, and press the left OK navigation button. Enter the auth code 52s. This is the code we programmed in the OMM. Press the left Next navigation button. Highlight Enter Park, and press the left OK navigation button. Using the keypad, enter the all-numeric system-generated part code we saw on the Portable Parts screen. And press the left Next navigation button. The handset will attempt to subscribe to the system. If it subscribes, you will see the word Success. Now press the red Hang-Up/Power button to return to the main screen. You will see the name, number, and system name you programmed into the OMM. So we have now successfully configured one RFP, added a handset user, and subscribed the user. Our system is now fully functional. The next thing I want to do is to add 3 more handset users. So I will power up the next handset, select my language, enter the auth code, highlight Show IPEI, and press the left OK navigation button. I'll go back to the OMM, click on Portable Parts, add a new DECT handset user, enter the name, number, and IPEI from the handset, enter the username, and click OK. I'll double check that the subscription allowed has a green check mark. On the handset, with the menu open, remember you can press the middle Escape button to go back one menu, or you can press the red Hang-Up/Power button to return directly to the main screen. I'll open the menu, highlight System, and press the left OK navigation button. Highlight New System, and press the left OK navigation button. Enter the auth code 52s, and press the left OK navigation button. Highlight Enter Park, and press the left OK navigation button. I'll enter the part code that was on the Portable Parts screen in the OMM, and press the left OK navigation button. The handset will attempt to subscribe to the system. I'll wait until I see the word Success, and press the red Hang-Up/Power button to return to the main screen. There is my second user and number. I'll add the third user. And the fourth user. Continue this process to add all of your users and to subscribe your handsets. If a subscription fails on a handset, make sure in the OMM on the Portable Parts menu that the subscription allowed has a green check mark, and double-check your IPEI number. If the handset still won't subscribe, but all of the information is correct, delete the user in the OMM and re-add it as a new user. Then, retry to subscribe the handset. In the OMM, click on Portable Parts to refresh the screen. One final note on subscribing handsets. There are multiple ways to build, add, and subscribe handsets. The method in this tutorial may take a little longer than other methods, but has the highest probability of a successful subscription to the correct RFP. Now let's add a second RFP. Plug the second RFP into the PoE network. Again, if the network does not support PoE, you can use the optional power cable. As with the first RFP, make sure your PC is on the same subnet as the second RFP. Use the OMM System CD and launch the configurator. Click on the Scan button and watch the status in the bottom left corner. Scan Request OK. This time, I see 2 MAC addresses. Verify the new MAC address matches the second RFP. It does. Click on the second MAC address. Click on the Login checkbox and enter the default username and password information. The default is OMM, all lowercase, for both fields. We will continue down to Use Local Configuration. Select Yes if you were assigning a static IP address to the RFP. Next, I'll enter in the second RFP's static IP address. Again, I got this from the network administrator. It is 10.70.109.165. Enter the subnet mask, -255.255.255.0. Enter the TFTP server address. I am going to use a standalone TFTP program, so I will enter my PC's IP address. Enter the TFTP file name. Again, for RFPs L35 and L36, it is IP RFP 3G.dnld. Enter the OMM IP address, which was the IP address of the first RFP we installed, 10.70.109.152. Enter the router addresses. This is your gateway router IP address. Click on the plus sign and enter the IP address. I'll add the same parameters as I did on the first RFP. DNS addresses, NTP server name, country. Then I'll click on Send Config. Again, watch the status in the bottom left corner. If successful, it will say Sending OK. That completes the initial configurator setup for the second RFP. Again, once the RFP has a valid IP address and is communicating with the network, you will see the light turn green. Now let's log into the OMM. Remember, the OMM IP address is the first RFP we turned up. So in my browser, I will enter 10.70.109.152. Go to Radio Fixed Parts. If needed, click on the Start button to activate Capture Allowed. This is indicated by a green check mark. After a few seconds, you should see the second RFP. Above our first RFP, it says DEC Cluster Number 1, and there is one RFP in this cluster. Let's also add the second RFP to this cluster, meaning these two RFPs will be synchronized in the same cluster and can hand over active calls from one RFP to another as DEC handset users walk around. Click on the edit icon and enter the name. I will use RFP2, Texas, east part of the building. Check the box to the left of DECT settings, then enter the cluster number. This is what ties the RFPs together, and click on the OK button. I now have DECT cluster number 1 with 2 RFPs in it. After a short time, you will see the second RFP become connected and active. As an additional note, once the new RFP becomes part of your system, the RFP's password is updated to your system password. For my example, it was OMM, the default. Now it's the system password which I created, which is DEC2134. So if we go back to the configurator to edit this RFP, we will need to use the system password from now on. Before we move on, I want to show you 2 additional pieces of information regarding the RFPs, which is how to set up multiple clusters and how to set up a second standby OMM. Sometimes RFPs don't need to be part of the same cluster. For example, if they are in a different building, these RFPs can be put into a different cluster. RFPs in different clusters will not be synchronized with each other, meaning active calls will not be handed off or handed over between 2 different clusters. However, handsets will still be subscribed across the entire network or system. So when the DEC handset user goes to the other building, the handset will still work without requiring resubscription. To put an RFP in a different cluster, click on the Edit button. Change the cluster number. For this example, I will use the number 2 and click OK. Now I have cluster number 1 with 1 RFP and cluster number 2 with 1 RFP. To put the RFPs back in the same cluster, click on the Edit button, change the cluster number back to 1 and click OK. There, I'm back to the original configuration. DEC cluster number 1 with 2 RFPs. By now, you should realize the OMM runs the entire DEC system, and the OMM is built into and running on our first RFP. To provide redundancy, you can designate a second standby OMM. So if something happens to the first OMM, which is running on our first RFP, a second OMM running on a different RFP can take over. To configure a second standby OMM simply requires adding 1 parameter to each RFP using the configurator tool. So we will launch the configurator, click on the scan button, select the MAC address of the first RFP, check the login box, enter the login username and password, and press the List Configuration button to see our current configuration. Now, click on Add Parameter. Select Second OMM IP address. Enter the second RFP's IP address. For this example, that will be 10.70.109.165. And then click on Send Config. Repeat the process for the second RFP. Click on the MAC. The login information will be stored while the current session is open. Press the List Configuration button. Click on Add Parameter. Select Second OMM IP address. Enter the IP address. Again, for my example, it is 10.70.109.165. Then click on Send Config. One last thing. For every additional RFP that you turn up, you will need to add this parameter so that it will know how to get to the OMM and how to get to the second standby OMM. Now with this configuration, if anything happens to our first OMM, which is running on our first RFP, the second standby OMM, which is running on a different RFP, can take over. Be aware that the service will be interrupted for a small amount of time while the second OMM begins the process to take over the DEC system. Now let's add a third RFP. This is different because the part code only allows 2 RFPs on the system. When we add a third RFP, we will need to stop and launch a browser and go to the license server website where we will enter information about our DEC system and download a license file that will activate the built-in license features and capacity on our DECT system. So let me demonstrate the whole process, including seeing the third RFP license error. I'll begin by plugging in my third RFP. Open the configurator, scan for the third RFP. When it finds it, I'll verify the MAC address, then input the third RFP's information. And I'll click on Send Config. Now we'll open the OMM and go to Radio Fix Parts. I'll click on the Start button so capture is allowed. There is my third RFP. Click on the Edit icon, and I get a message the system is completely configured. There are no free resources available for adding further Radio Fix parts. Before we can add a third L-RFP, we will need to import a license file that will activate the built-in license features. For this next step, we will need 3 RFP MAC addresses, which are right here on the Radio Fix Parts page. You will also need the TAD code and PARC code that is printed on the OMM system CD. The process is pretty simple. We will go to the license server webpage and enter the 3 L-RFP MAC addresses, the TAD code, and the PARC code, and you'll be prompted to download a license file. We will then import the license file into the OMM to activate the license features and unlock the system's full 20 L-RFP capacity. So let's begin. Open a web browser window and go to http://license.aastra.de. Click on the tab Generation of Licenses. Then on the left, click on Generate License. Select the license carrier type SIP-DECT. One at a time, enter the 3 L-RFP MAC addresses. Double check to make sure you've typed the addresses correctly. Then click on the Check MAC button. From the drop-down menu, select your release. Enter the TAD code printed on the OMM CD. Click on Check TAD. Enter the PARC code printed on the OMM system CD. Optionally, you can leave this field blank, and the system will generate a new PARC code. However, this will require resubscription of the handsets. Under License Products, verify the checkbox is checked for OM System Activation for L-RFP Installations. Click on the Generate License button. A pop-up message will recap what I just told you about the PARC codes. Click on the OK button. Click on Download Importable File and save the file. If you're not sure where to save the file, I like to use my desktop so I know exactly where the file was saved. We are now finished with the license server webpage. Return to the OMM. You may need to log back in. From the menu on the left, click on Licenses. Then under License File Import, click on Browse. Navigate to the location or folder where you saved the license file. I saved my license file to my desktop, so I will select Desktop and then select the license file and click on Open. The final step is to click on the Import button. The OMM will restart with the new license features activated and expand your system capacity to 20 RFPs. In your browser, relaunch the OMM IP address and log back in. Now let's look at the status screen. You will see the license field has been updated and the system can now be configured with up to 20 L-RFPs. So I'll return to Radio Fix Parts and continue to configure the third RFP. I'll click on the Edit icon, give it a name, check the DECT setting box and assign it to DECT cluster number 1 and click OK. The third RFP is active and connected. You can see in DECT cluster number 1, I now have 3 radio fixed parts. And that completes the installation of the third RFP. In this tutorial, we added 3 RFPs in one synchronized cluster, meaning the RFPs can hand off active calls as DECT handset users walk around. We have an OMM, a second standby OMM, and we have added 4 SIP-DECT handset users. We also went to the license server website, entered the system information, downloaded the license file, and then imported the license file into the OMM, which activated the license features and unlocked the system's L-RFP capacity for up to 20 L-RFPs. We hope you found this tutorial helpful on the Aastra SIP-DECT basic installation.